Devil Venerable also wants to know. Chapter 27, Sleeping Through the Literature Conference. Azure Sky Mountain, outside 5 Willow Manor. Just like before, the Devil Venerable was accompanied by his 2 protectors. His left protector stood at the side of his missing arm, while the right protector held a pipa with a silk veil over her face. She wore a thin blue robe which accentuated her figure, and was playing the pipa for Wenren. Inadvertently, she let the scar on her right arm show. It stood out starkly against her fair skin and must have been caused by some terrible injury, garnering the pity of anyone who saw it. They were at a library just outside 5 Willow Manor, which was a favored place for mortal scholars to gather and read poetry or discuss literature. It was also a place where the Zhongli cultivation clan recruited disciples. The greatest difference between a cultivation clan and a cultivation sect was that a cultivation sect was situated apart from the mortal world, while a cultivation clan participated in it. The Zhongli were a clan of learned scholars and the main family were cultivators who lived within the 5 Willow Manor. The branch family would enter the court through the imperial exams, dedicating their lives to serving the emperor. This was the path of a cultivation clan. Just like how Wenren had sought the Dao on the battlefield, the Zhongli clan took the path of the sages writing poetry or books to gain the acclaim of mortal academics and using that to advance in cultivation. In ancient times, the one known as the poet sage, the Qing sword immortal of 10 steps to kill a man, not leaving a trace for 1,000 li fame, had also walked this path. Therefore, each of the 4 major cultivation clans would accept disciples from the general public and each generation of the clan head and successor would build up their own reputation. Their admirers and fame served as the foundations of their cultivation. The more people read books in the mortal world, the further their works would spread, and the greater the power of the Zhongli clan would be. They were split into the same ranks as the righteous and demonic cultivators, but their strength could be drastically different. Those disciples of cultivator clans with many supporters could become more powerful the more highly they were thought of in the world, but if they didn't have supporters, their cultivators at Mahayana stage might not even be able to defeat a body unity stage cultivator. In the original plot, this cultivation family was unknown until the Great Sect War, which caused heavy losses to the cultivation world and ushered in a prosperous age for the mundane world. More and more people had the chance to read books and even the lower class could learn a few words, recite a few lines of poetry and remember the names of some sages. Thus, the Zhongli clan had now grown in influence. After 50 years of this prosperity, Zhongli Qian had enough clout to steal Bailey Qingmiao, who was imprisoned at the back mountain, away from Shangqing sect. This time around, because of Wenren's personal interference in the Great Sect War, even more spiritual energy had been returned to the mortal realm, and the Zhongli clan had grown influential and powerful in just 12 years. The library at 5 Willow Manor was bustling, and the fact that Wenren and Yin Hanjiang were able to get a window seat was only thanks to Xu Yanyan forking over enough money. They had come in this courtyard today because this was the day when several young masters from the Zhongli clan would hold literary discussion here. Scholars came from far and wide to attend and no one could get in without an invitation. It was easy enough for them to gain access inside with an illusion, but the seating was more troublesome. Xu Yanyan had pressed a silver into the doorman's hand, and let her hand brush against his a little. He was only a foundation establishment cultivator and was no match for Xu Yanyan's seduction, so he pocketed the silver in a daze and showed them to an out-of-the-way position. The young masters from Zhongli clan had not yet arrived, but the seats were already filled. Upon seeing how Wenren and Yin Hanjiang were dressed like martial artists and not even wearing scholarly robes yet had gotten such good seats, a few people came over to pick a fight. They obviously weren't going to throw fists but challenge them to recite poetry. Wenren and Yin Hanjiang could beat people in a fight perfectly fine, but they both frowned simultaneously when poetry was brought up. All these recitations sounded like the buzzing of flies beside their ears, and they thought that Xu Yanyan's 12 heavenly demons would be easier to deal with. Fortunately, Xu Yanyan was more cultured than they were. While strumming her pipa, She sang a few poems, the music and verse matching perfectly. She shamed the scholars into silence and they bowed and bid farewell, leaving the group alone. Xu Yanyan returned to her seat and gave Wenren a fawning smile as she transmitted, "Venerable One, I did well, right?" Wenren nodded slightly and raised one finger. Xu Yanyan's eyes brightened. "Can my punishment be reduced by 10 years, she asked excitedly. Wenren shook his head. One year." Xu Yanyan pressed her lips together. 1 month, Wenren said. "Only 1 month." Xu Yanyan cried, feeling frantic. "Venerable One, you said if I showed good results, my punishment would be decreased." "Capturing Zhongli Qian can be considered good result," Wenren said. "You haven't done anything at all yet." Xu Yanyan didn't dare argue anymore with the Venerable One and shrank back, tears filling her eyes. She looked so pitiful that the scholars watching nearly got up and started berating Wenren and Yin Hanjiang's lack of consideration for the fairer sex. Fortunately, the Zhongli clan's arrival spared the gathering from being massacred by the devil Venerable. The current generation of the Zhongli clan had 3 distinguished young masters. The highest ranking was Zhongli Qian, looking cultured and refined as he entered slowly, wearing white robes with a bamboo scroll in hand. He took the main seat, his bearing distinguished with each of his motion calm and at ease. In cloud-like dress, he raises a bow and takes aim at Sirius, Xu Yanyan said, her eyes fixed on Zhongli Qian from the moment he had entered. She transmitted to Wenren, "Venerable One, do you know how much time I once spent studying poetry in order to foster the image of a cultured woman? It was just so I could hook up with young scholars like Zhongli Qian. Ah, he's amazing." Zhongli Qian was the most favored heir to the Zhongli clan. He had recently broken through to void boundary stage and naturally could sense Xu Yanyan's gaze on him. He gave her a slight nod, then moved his gaze away and didn't look back to her again. "Venerable One." Xu Yanyan transmitted in excitement. "The one we're supposed to lure in is him, right? He's the best. Back then, I used my seduction when he looked at me but he wasn't affected at all. Have I actually found a true gentleman? If you can get him, he's yours," Wenren transmitted back. If Zhongli Qian could be charmed by Xu Yanyan, then there was no point in setting him up with the female lead. Wenren didn't want to create another He Wenzhao. He might as well wait for that ghost cultivator to grow up. It should only be 8 more years or so. There was no reason not to let Xu Yanyan test Zhongli Qian to see whether he really was a true gentleman. The 2 young masters accompanying Zhongli Qian were Zhongli Hung and Zhongli Kuang. Zhongli Hung wore a plain green robe and looked very dignified as he followed Zhongli Qian. Zhongli Kuang wore brocade and had a willful and frivolous look in his eyes. When Xu Yanyan accidentally met his gaze, he raised his wine dish and made a toast to her in midair. Xu Yanyan showed no reaction, turning away and ignoring him completely to sip at her tea. Without waiting for Wenren to ask, she answered his question on her own. "I've seen too many self-important men like Zhongli Kuang who were always after women and liquor. Normally I could fool around with him for a bit seeing as his looks are okay, but now that I've caught sight of Zhongli Qian, my appetite's been whetted and I can't spare a glance for anyone else." Upon seeing Xu Yanyan ignore him, Zhongli Kuang bared a malicious smile with excitement in his eyes. If Zhongli Hung hadn't quietly grabbed his robes, Zhongli Kuang might have walked right up to Xu Yanyan to raise a toast to her. After the 3 young masters from Zhongli clan sat, the meeting began. Zhongli Hung would first bring up a topic and everyone would give their own view about it. Then Zhongli Kuang would interrupt and shoot down a few people's ideas, which the majority would applaud for. Everyone was cursing each other out with polite language, and as the debates grew heated, Zhongli Qian rapped his bamboo scroll on his desk and said something that Wenren didn't understand. The room suddenly went quiet and respectful, all following Zhongli Qian's lead. Wenren's eyelids were drooping as he listened. Seeing Xu Yanyan pick up a pen and start scribbling down notes, he scrubbed a hand over his face with some difficulty and suddenly felt someone's head bump his shoulder. He glanced over to see that Yin Hanjiang had dozed off. Realizing that he had acted improperly and invaded the Venerable One's personal space, Yin Hanjiang bit his bottom lip, his ears burning red. Venerable One, this subordinate must have fallen under the Zhongli clan's enchantment, he transmitted. I don't even know when or how I fell for it. This subordinate's abilities are too low and has brought shame to the Venerable One. Wenren he held back a smile and transmitted back, if you hadn't hit this Venerable One, I probably would have also fallen asleep. Ever since I was young, I always started dozing off the minute I heard poetry recitals. Who would have thought that even after becoming a cultivator, I'd be powerless to escape this curse? This subordinate is the same, Yin Hanjiang said awkwardly. The two were a bit reinvigorated by their private conversation, but they couldn't resist in the end. As the meeting went on and Zhongli Kuang began asserting his own opinion again, Wenren he and Yin Hanjiang had already stopped paying attention. Though their eyes were open, their heads were tipping toward each other's again, and they knocked each other awake a second time. Zhongli Kuang, who had kept glancing over at Xu Yanyan, obviously noticed that the two men accompanying her were nodding off with their eyes open. Furiously, he addressed them, do these two sirs have anything to add? In this literature meeting, everyone besides the three young masters from Zhongli clan was all referred to as sir. Wenren he never expected someone to use sir to address him, and since he was half asleep, it took him a while to realize that Zhongli Kuang was talking to him. Zhongli Kuang was incensed at this and stood up. May I inquire as to these two's names, places of origin, and who they got recommendations from? Everyone's eyes turned to Wenren he and Yin Hanjiang. Seeing that they weren't dressed like scholars, a hubbub immediately broke out. Zhongli Kuang's attitude was unacceptably rude for Yin Hanjiang. After gaining Wenren he's approval, he said in a clear voice, it was not that we came here specifically but simply caught wind that there would be a literature meeting today. My master and I have been troubled by insomnia for some days, and since we were already dozing off just listening from outside, we were very eager to attend. Indeed, we've been able to sleep very soundly and must thank the honored people here. Yin Hanjiang managed to offend everyone in the gathering all at once. In particular, Zhongli Kuang's face darkened further. He gripped a brush in one hand and secretly circulated his spiritual energy, planning to teach the two a lesson. However, Zhongli Qian stood up. The purpose of the Zhongli family's literature conferences is to offer knowledge and aid to all members of society. Even if these two sirs are not interested in literature, this Qian is still grateful that this conference could relieve your insomnia. His response was so excessively lenient that even Yin Hanjiang couldn't stay angry. With just a few words, he managed to dissipate the tension in the room, and even if Zhongli Kuang wanted to throw a tantrum, he no longer had an excuse. Wenren he looked at him appreciatively. Cupping his hands, he said, many thanks to young Master Zhongli. We have indeed gained much from this visit. After Zhongli Qian smoothed out the situation, the conference continued, with no one minding when Wenren he and Yin Hanjiang fell asleep again. After all, young Master Zhongli had said that books could heal the mind, and insomnia was a disorder of the mind. If the two sleeping men's ailment had been cured, then at least they had gained some results. Protector Shu, I'm afraid you won't be able to get this man, Wenren he transmitted to Xu Yanyan. I didn't know real gentlemen still existed in this world, Xu Yanyan said, propping her chin in her hand as she watched Zhongli Qian. Now that I think about it, even if I can't get him in my hands, that'll just further prove his integrity. Just looking at someone like that from afar is good, too. Everyone in attendance approved of Zhongli Qian. Only Zhongli Kuang, who was sitting to his left, had a malicious look in his eyes. Wenren he picked up on his ill intent and was watching him, trying to remember what importance he had to the story, when he felt an odd anomaly in the space above Zhongli Kuang's head, in which he saw the faint shape of a book. He was suddenly reminded of how he had obtained abusive love affair, you are the only one that will remain in my heart. He had also felt a spatial disturbance above his head, and when he reached out, his hand had closed around the book. Seeing that the book was about to fall into Zhongli Kuang's lap, Wenren he picked up a book on his table and threw it at his head, just managing to knock the other one off course. "What are you doing?" Zhongli Kuang couldn't take it anymore and rose with a slap of his hand against his desk. "My hand slipped and I accidentally threw over 2 books, Wenren he replied casually. He turned to Xu Yanyan. "Can you go pick up those 2 books? Xu Yanyan, who was still under punishment, couldn't disobey the Venerable One's order. She hurried over to Zhongli Kuang and seeing that he was stepping on 2 books, she said awkwardly, "Young master, I beg you to step aside." Her eyes were pitiful and sparkling with tears. With everyone looking at him, Zhongli Kuang couldn't trouble an innocent girl. Seeing that Zhongli Qian's eyes were on him, he reluctantly moved his foot, allowing Xu Yanyan to retrieve the books. After thanking him, Xu Yanyan bent gracefully to pick them up. She saw that one of them was the book of poems that she had brought, but the other was a tome as thick as a brick. Handing them back to Wenren she saw out of the corner of her eye the title in bold characters across the cover: The God of Destruction, Volume 1. End chapter. Devil Venerable also wants to know. Chapter 28, A Pile of Rubbish. When he tossed the book, Wenren he had put up an illusion to make it look like 2 books had flown over. As a Mahayana stage cultivator, it was easy for him to fool some mortals. Even Zhongli Kuang hadn't realized that there was only 1 book. Only Zhongli Qian swept over a suspicious glance. He had also caught a glimpse of the cover and knew that it didn't belong to the library where they were. But in that case, where had it come from? The Devil Venerable had no intention of explaining. Right when he saw the 2nd book appear, he no longer had any interest in staying at the conference. He transmitted to Xu Yanyan, "Use whatever method you can to separate Zhongli Qian from the Zhongli clan. If you can do that, your punishment will be decreased by 99 years. The last year could be for the 2 hall masters who had been locked in the water prison and the 2 who had been dragged to her bed. A year was nothing for Xu Yanyan anyways." Hearing that her sentence could be lightened so much, her eyes brightened and she immediately replied, "This subordinate won't disappoint you." After issuing his command, Wenren he nodded to Zhongli Qian, then leapt out of the window, so quickly that none of the ordinary people in attendance knew what had happened. The 3 young masters from the Zhongli clan had noticed, however. When Wenren he silently bid farewell to Zhongli Qian, he had shown that he was a high-level cultivator. Not wanting to cause any trouble, Zhongli Qian turned his attention to the conference instead. Zhongli Kuang was so furious and on the verge of flipping a table. Zhongli Qian smoothly took the brush out of his hand, turned around and wrote a poem across a wall. His bearing was dignified, his brush strokes free and graceful. Flecks of ink landed on his white sleeve, blossoming through the fabric. His literacy and bearing both stopped people in their tracks. After having his pen taken, Zhongli Kuang knew that Zhongli Qian wouldn't permit him to make a fuss anymore and could only suppress his anger. He returned to his seat and gulped down a mouthful of wine. After the conference ended, the scholars all gathered around Zhongli Qian with praise, unwilling to leave. Zhongli Qian reassured them that the 5 Willow Manor was open to all who have a love for learning, and they could come to discuss literature anytime. Only then did they all leave happily. Xu Yanyan kept making eyes at Zhongli Qian but could only wait until the end to get up. Seeing that Zhongli Qian really didn't pay any attention to her, she dejectedly walked out of the library. After going a few steps, she heard a voice call to her from behind. "Could this lady please wait?" Xu Yanyan put on a soft smile, and when she turned around to see Zhongli Kuang, she thought that even if she couldn't get the shark fin soup, she could still make do with this small fish. The important part was that Zhongli Kuang could be used to lure out Zhongli Qian. If she could get a hold of Zhongli Qian, the Venerable One would return her darlings to her. Xu Yanyan was willing to occasionally pick a weed from the roadside for the sake of a forest. Meanwhile, after getting the book, Wenren he immediately flew to a faraway mountain range with Yin Hanjiang. Only after setting up an array and having Yin Hanjiang stand guard outside was he finally willing to start reading. Just the first volume of the God of Destruction was about as thick as the abusive love affair, You Are the Only One That Will Remain in My Heart, meaning that it was also a long book with more than 1 million words to read, so he created a table and chair and sat down to carefully go through it. He spent 3 days and nights reading the book non-stop. After finishing, Wenren he was left with some troubling thoughts. Objectively speaking, if this book had been an ordinary story, he would have enjoyed it. Some of the plot points were genuinely exciting, and he had wanted to applaud the protagonist several times. The protagonist of the story was a male, who had lived in an unremarkable small town in his youth. His father was never mentioned and he took painstaking care of his ill mother. He was a ringleader of the other penniless kids, but the rich children next door would often bully him and even their servants would look down on him. But the protagonist told himself that he would prove them wrong someday as he would make his way up in the world. One winter, he left to gather firewood in the mountains. When he returned, he found the entire village silent. Running in, he discovered that everyone had been slaughtered. The boy fell to his knees, crying, and the sound drew the attention of a passing cultivator. The boy returned with him to his sect and was found to have a rare spiritual root. His path of cultivation opened up right before him. In his sect, he became the Qing everyone looked up to, but there was a dark shadow in his heart. He was still focused on finding the assailant who had murdered his family and friends. His master had told him that the village might have been massacred by demonic cultivators as part of some evil technique, so he vowed to destroy the demonic sects and dedicated himself to cultivation. After reaching Foundation establishment, he left the sect and looked for the family that had once bullied him, who had moved away and avoided the massacre. He then took his revenge on them viciously. Later on, he became the sect master and took in many supporters. Among them was a bastard son of a cultivation clan, a good-hearted demonic cultivator, a wandering immortal who had gone down the wrong path, and elders who treated him as their equals. He was also fortunate enough to meet an ancient deity who became his master, helping him through many dangers and earning his deepest gratitude. He had also met many and varied female companions, who were all willing to share him between themselves. His main wife, whom he respected highly, kept everyone in line. At the end of the first volume, with the help of his master, he finally entrapped and killed the #1 demonic cultivator, who was also suspected of slaughtering his village. However, he subsequently found new clues that pointed to the murderer being someone else, an immortal from the upper realms. In order to find his nemesis, the male lead took his most talented wife, his little Shime, then they ascended to the immortal realm, ending the first volume. At the end it was written that for the continuation of the plot in the immortal realm, please check out The God of Destruction, Volume 2. There was nothing wrong with the story itself, but once the name of the characters were mentioned, it became a different matter. The main character of The God of Destruction, Volume 1, was He Wenzhou. His main wife was the master of Xiling Pavilion. His headstrong and disobedient Shime was Bailey Qingmiao, one of his friends was Zhongli Kuang, and the demonic cultivator he had killed at the end was Wenren He. By taking another point of view, this book had turned the plot of abusive love affair completely on its head. The events were the same, but one was in Bailey Qingmiao's point of view and the other was in He Wenzhou's perspective. In The God of Destruction, the interpretation of the events were completely different. For example, when Bailey Qingmiao was imprisoned, it was because the master of Xiling Pavilion had pointed out right before her wedding to He Wenzhou that her fate was governed by Polis, and she would always be followed by death and disaster. In order to protect his beloved Shime, He Wenzhou had her locked up in the mountains to prevent anyone from getting to her. From Bailey Qingmiao's point of view, it was because He Wenzhou had heard that the master of Xiling Pavilion had medicine that could save the sect master, but when he went to ask for it, the pavilion master took a liking to him and made it a condition to marry her. He Wenzhou had told Bailey Qingmiao to be patient and not to make a fuss. Then he locked her up in order to prevent her from disrupting the wedding. Wenren he. And as for the part where Zhongli Qian ran into Bailey Qingmiao and rescued her, from Bailey Qingmiao's point of view, she was grateful to have been saved from a place that had hurt her, but for He Wenzhao it was bad news. Someone stole the protagonist's wife. Better hurry and go kill that two-faced pretty boy. Wenren he. If he hadn't been the villainous mastermind who died at the end, Wenren he might have really believed the twisted facts of the God of Destruction, Volume 1. The first page of the God of Destruction, Volume 1, had a passage similar to that of abusive love affair, "You are the only one that will remain in my heart." However, in the abusive love affair, what was said was, due to an overabundance of plot holes, this story has been rejected by its readers. Thus, the most popular character among the readers has been selected to personally verify the story's consistency and make suitable changes. Whereas in the God of Destruction, Volume 1, the message read, due to the story deviating from its original form, it has been rejected by its readers. Thus, the most loyal character to the protagonist has been selected in order to correct inconsistencies in the original work. The God of Destruction, Volume 1, had appeared above Zhongli Kuang's head, so he must be the most loyal character to the protagonist. He was a supporting character in the story, just like Wenren he. Wenren he placed both books on the table and considered them deeply. The appearance of the God of Destruction, Volume 1, confirmed further for him that the world he lived in was real. The characters in it had their own thoughts and intentions and were not subject to any outside control. One of the books was merely on the point of view of the female lead, Bailey Qingmiao, whereas the other was in the point of view of the male lead, He Wenzhao. They showed the same world filtered through two different lenses. If Wenren he had become the protagonist, it would probably lead to another, completely different book. To Bailey Qingmiao, Wenren he was her savior who sacrificed himself in the sea of blood of the underworld for her sake, but for He Wenzhao, Wenren he was his sworn enemy who had killed his family and taken his girl. His strength was no match to Wenren he, so in order to take down the villain who had single-handedly masterminded the Great Sect War, he asked for help from the master who lived within his body. Wenren he was surrounded and killed at the Sea of Blood, and He Wenzhao managed to rescue his poor Shimei from his clutches. The story of the God of Destruction, Volume 1, seemed to be more logical than abusive love affair, or at least all the readers could follow the protagonist's actions. But if you asked Wenren he, it was a pile of rubbish. Wenren he placed a hand on the cover and said coldly, "Planning to use the Sea of Blood to do away with this Venerable One? This Venerable One would like to see you try." He put away the books and took down the array. Seeing Yin Hanjiang standing guard outside, he asked, "Has there been news from the Right Protector yet?" The Right Protector sent word yesterday that she had already gotten her hands on Zhongli Kuang and that she was going to use him as bait for Zhongli Qian. According to Zhongli Kuang, Zhongli Qian is powerful and has an immortal artifact on him, so he may be a tough opponent. The Right Protector hopes that the Venerable One will lend a hand, in order to ensure Zhongli Qian's capture, Yin Hanjiang replied. Wenren he didn't respond and just turned into a streak of crimson light, picked up Yin Hanjiang and returned to the azure sky mountain in scarcely the blink of an eye. Zhongli Kuang's house was outside the Five Willow Manor and Xu Yanyan was currently staying in the courtyard, having daily dalliances with Zhongli Kuang. After they were done she would also recite poetry or paint with him, not enjoying herself in the least. When Wenren he barged in, Zhongli Kuang was in the sheets with Xu Yanyan. Seeing two people suddenly appear in his room, he was shocked and prepared to attack when a blood-red flower bloomed before his eyes and he lost consciousness. "Right Protector," Wenren he said coldly while holding a book in one hand. "Steal his nascent soul, turn him into a puppet and use his soul as bait for Zhongli Qian." "Sweet," Xu Yanyan said, her eyes brightening. She immediately put a palm against Zhongli Kuang's dantian and extracted his nascent soul in no time at all, as it was a task she was quite practiced in. "Why you people," Zhongli Kuang could only manage these two words, before the wicked woman by his side destroyed his foundation forever. End chapter. Devil Venerable also wants to know. Chapter 29, Poisonous Woman. Venerable 1, Shu Yanyan presented Zhongli Kuang's nascent soul to Wenren He with both hands. It's yours, Wenren He said without even sparing her a glance. Put your clothes on. He had underestimated Shu Yanyan's ruthlessness. He had thought that Shu Yanyan would at least put on her clothes and fight Zhongli Kuang head-on. Instead, she had taken action immediately with only a thin blanket wrapped around her. Forget Zhongli Kuang, Wenren He himself had been taken by surprise after giving the order. Zhongli Kuang was also a decisive person. Seeing that Shu Yanyan had wasted no time in turning on him, he immediately abandoned his body and nascent soul, trying to escape as a spirit. However, the black-robed youth standing near him was prepared for anything and drew his sword to cut off the fleeing soul's path. Who are you people? If you kill me, the Zhongli clan won't forgive you. Zhongli Kuang's soul stammered out. Really, said Wenren He. Didn't you always believe that the Zhongli clan don't acknowledge you at all, and that they would be willing to dispose of you at any time to further Zhongli Qian's interests? Zhongli Kuang's soul wavered at having his deepest thoughts read. People might be able to lie, but it was difficult for a soul to do so. Wenren He noticed immediately that his words had struck home. As they spoke, Shu Yanyan had already put on her clothes. She climbed off the bed with perfect grace. If she wasn't still holding Zhongli Kuang's corpse-like body, she would have looked like a painting. Her fingers were like claws, digging into Zhongli Kuang's head as she dragged his body onto the floor. Yet a warm smile graced her face. A poisonous woman was certainly a fitting description for her. Venerable 1, Zhongli Kuang had leaked a lot of information in these last few days, Shu Yanyan said. Anytime I said something good about Zhongli Qian, he would call him a self-righteous hypocrite, power-hungry and always mistreating branch family members and illegitimate children like himself. Seeing how deep his resentment for Zhongli Qian is, this subordinate can say that the Venerable 1 really got this one right. You wicked bitch. Resentment suffused Zhongli Kuang's soul, pouring out as black smoke. Shu Yanyan smiled. So what if I'm a wicked bitch? Do you really think that just because this wicked bitch was hungry, anyone would do? I didn't even see you at first as I was after Zhongli Qian all this while. I can't believe how much of a self-important loser you are either. I don't even want to absorb your nascent soul. So, I will refine it into an elixir and reward it to this protector's subordinates. They would at least have some sweet words for me in exchange. This Venerable 1 seems to recall that Protector Shu no longer has subordinates, Wenren He said, giving Shu Yanyan a sideways glance. Shu Yanyan's face fell and her carefree posture slumped. She said obediently, the entire Xianyuan sect belongs to the Venerable 1. This subordinate is your vanguard and will out. Why are you kicking me? Upon hearing the word vanguard, Yin Hanjiang couldn't help but give her a kick in the kneecap. Alcade is not this Venerable 1's vanguard, Wenren He said. You are my right arm. Yin Hanjiang pulled back his foot and gave Shu Yanyan a nod. Vanguard. Shu Yanyan. If she'd known earlier that Wenren He had actually survived his battles with the 21 righteous sect experts, she would have let go of her concern for Chiu Kongxiu and went after him while he was down. There was nothing she could do about it now. She made a misplay, and now she was a fish for Wenren He to gut in any way he liked. The ever-flexible right protector said, Venerable 1, I'll refine Zhongli Kuang's body into a puppet right now. No. Zhongli Kuang's soul cried out. Aren't you after Zhongli Qian? I hate him. I want him dead. If you give me my body back, I'll trick him for you. I don't care what you want to do to him. Even if his nascent soul was taken, he could use some sort of elixir to restore it, but if his body was refined, he could only become a ghost cultivator. You sure say what you think, Wenren He said. Zhongli Kuang had been this kind of person in the God of Destruction, too. He openly proclaimed his hatred for Zhongli Qian in front of He Wenzhou, swearing that he would kill him and take over the Zhongli clan. He Wenzhou resented Zhongli Qian at the time for taking his beloved Shimei away and bonded with Zhongli Kuang over their common enemy. He also transferred the resentment he held from being bullied by rich children to Zhongli Qian, believing that rich heirs who grew up pampered like him were all just scumbags and womanizers. Thus, He Wenzhou and his secret master helped Zhongli Kuang plot against Zhongli Qian, destroying his reputation and power along with it. Zhongli Kuang, who had stolen Zhongli Qian's good name, eventually killed him. These events were never mentioned in Abusive Love Affair, where Zhongli Qian never showed up again after Bailey Qingmiao rejected his offer as she still insisted on staying with her Shixing. Zhongli Qian was a true gentleman and he left quietly after telling Bailey Qingmiao that she could come to 5 Willow Manor any time she was in trouble. Who knew that after he let Bailey Qingmiao go, he was killed by He Wenzhou and Zhongli Kuang. The most interesting part was that, in the reviews of Abusive Love Affair, the ones about Zhongli Qian were mostly along the lines of, "Sob, Zhongli Qian is too good, really a true gentleman, respecting and protecting the MC and wanting to spend his life with her. And yet when Bailey Qingmiao chose He Wenzhou again, he let her go and told her I can forever be your second option. I love him so much. If Bailey Qingmiao doesn't plan on using her eyeballs, she can donate them to someone in need. Don't let that pair of big sparkling eyes go to waste. Every time she looks at Wenren He, Zhongli Qian or Yin Hanjiang, her eyes are always sparkling. The word sparkling is triggering me by now. Cross out Yin Hanjiang up there, we don't want him. No one wants Yin Hanjiang? I think the murderous psycho type is kind of hot. With two hotties like Zhongli Qian and Wenren He right in front of her, each with their own qualifications, Bailey Qingmiao go on and choose someone like He Wenzhou. This bitch is seriously blind. She needs to donate her body to science. At least when she gets tortured to death by He Wenzhou, her organs can go to someone in need. However, the reviews about Zhongli Qian in the God of Destruction were completely different. He should die for stealing the MC's girl. Zhongli Qian disgusts me. What do you mean if I can't give you happiness then better I let you go? Where do you get off sounding so self-righteous after stealing someone's girl? Don't you know every woman in the world belongs to my Zhao Ji? Yes. Zhao Ji finally killed off Zhongli Qian. Shimei is way too rebellious. Just think, among all his wives, Zhao Ji loves little Shimei the most. Every time he gets into danger, it's for Shimei. Yet she's not faithful at all and runs off with other men every chance she gets. She even attacked Lu Xinyi. Lu Xinyi is so cute, always dedicated to Zhao Ji, offering her own body and golden core to save Zhao Ji. That's my kind of girl. Yet Zhao Ji tosses Lu Xinyi aside to save little Shimei who's always going after some other guy. I can't stand women like that. How does Bailey Qingmiao have the nerve to say to Zhao Ji Zhongli Qian has also been good to me, or Wenren he may be the devil venerable but he is honest in his words and actions and worthy of respect. Don't make me barf. Is the author reading this? Don't give such a fickle woman to our Zhao Ji. She can't hold a candle to the master of Xiling Pavilion. Wenren he decided to do everything he could to hide the God of Destruction, Volume 1. If Yin Hanjiang read it, he would have a chi deviation out of anger. Zhongli Kuang's soul knelt in midair, begging Wenren he to spare his life. Wenren he smiled, then ordered Xu Yanyan, refine it. I've already started, Xu Yanyan said with a glance at the soul, as she started reciting an incantation and refining his body into a puppet. What should we do with his soul? Ah, if Chiu Kongxiu was here, we could just give it to her for her heart-devouring ghost mother technique. Wenren he hadn't revealed the fact that Chiu Kongxiu was currently undercover at Shangqing sect yet, so Xu Yanyan still thought her soul had been sublimated by the great Peacock Wisdom King, and looked a bit gloomy as she mentioned her name. Take one of his earthly souls and turn it into a talisman to send to Zhongli Qian, Wenren he said. Tell him to leave the mountain by himself and ensure that he was going alone, or Zhongli Kuang's soul will be thrown to hungry ghosts, never to enter reincarnation. And no, please. Zhongli Kuang said, crying and wailing. I can use a secret password of the Zhongli clan to get Zhongli Qian down the mountain. Don't take any of my souls, I'm begging you. Humans had 3 divine souls and 7 earthly souls. If they lost any of their earthly souls, they would be mentally disabled in their next life. If they lost any of their divine souls, they could only reincarnate as an animal, and could never become a human again. Zhongli Kuang would rather enter reincarnation right now than lose one of his souls. Unfortunately, the 3 heartless demonic cultivators paid no heed to his pitiful cries. Xu Yanyan yanked out one of his earthly souls and made it into a talisman, and Zhongli Kuang immediately became listless, his weeping turning faint. The earthly souls governed emotions: love, hate, desire, sadness, anguish, rage and joy. Xu Yanyan had removed the soul governing hate, which had the clearest target and would be able to find Zhongli Qian easily, ignoring everyone else in his family to deliver itself right into his hands. What are you crying for? Xu Yanyan said after sending out the talisman, flicking Zhongli Kuang's spirit. The Venerable One is letting you see with your own eyes whether or not Zhongli Qian is a real gentleman. She had used a very gentle method to take his earthly soul, and even though it had been turned into a talisman, it could be rejoined to his spirit later. Zhongli Qian would realize that Zhongli Kuang could still be saved upon seeing the talisman, and if he was really willing to risk his life to save him, that would prove he was a good elder brother who protected his juniors. Wenren he and his companions set up a trap over a mountain for Zhongli Qian, as Zhongli Kuang's spirit sobbed all the while. He won't come for me as he would be happy to see a bastard like me die. He's a hypocrite who would take any chance to get rid of me. They waited until midnight, whereupon a white-robed figure came to the designated location under the bright moonlight. Standing before Wenren he's array, Zhongli Qian said, "This Qian has arrived as promised. If I am your target, I hope you honorable individuals can release my little brother's soul to be reincarnated." Xu Yanyan appeared before him, holding Zhongli Kuang's soul. "Zhongli Qian, it should be clear to you that our target is you. As the heir to the Zhongli clan, your importance far outweighs a bastard son like Zhongli Kuang. Why would you risk your life for him? It's not that this Qian who's important but the Zhongli clan," Zhongli Qian said calmly. "The reason I am placed above others is not because my cultivation is strong but because the reputation of the Zhongli clan that had been built up over many years rests on my shoulders. Without the Zhongli clan, I am just an ordinary cultivator. It doesn't matter if Zhongli Qian dies, but the Zhongli clan cannot abandon a single one of its members. Each of them make up the foundation of the Zhongli clan." Xu Yanyan secretly approved of Zhongli Qian, but her expression didn't show it. "I removed Zhongli Kuang's soul that governed his hatred. You should have been able to read from it his resentment towards you. He wants you to fall from grace, wants to kill you and dismember your corpse. Knowing that, why did you still came to save him? Even saints ought to have their limits. This protector has taken a liking to you, but I like saints with true intentions, not idiots." "I know," Zhongli Qian said, cupping his hands. "To tell the truth, I also dislike this little brother of mine. He is arrogant, thoughtless, and unreliable. Yet you still want to save him." Wenren he revealed himself. He looked over Zhongli Qian, mystified as to his thought process. Wenren he had unleashed the pressure of a Mahayana-level expert. Zhongli Qian paled upon realizing that he had met with real trouble. He let out a long sigh. "I still want to save him. This Zhongli Qian can die, but the Dao of the Zhongli clan cannot crumble. The Zhongli clan's heritage was the path of gentlemen. Zhongli Qian upheld the clan's entire path, and if he failed to abide by it, the Zhongli clan would fall. Coming out tonight to save Zhongli Kuang, the worst outcome would be that he would die without accomplishing anything, but the Zhongli clan's Dao would stand regardless. The clan had many branches, from which they could simply pick the most outstanding candidate to inherit their Dao. But if at this point, Zhongli Qian didn't come to save Zhongli Kuang, the entire Zhongli clan and their Dao would all crumble. Even if one was cheating the heavens, one still had to do it properly. You could only accomplish it if you bluffed until you yourself believed it and actually became what you said you were. In abusive love affair, Bailey Qingmiao often said that Zhongli Qian always looked tired, and that she wished he would relax a bit, smile a little easier. Zhongli Qian always answered that he had a responsibility, and though it was tiring, it was worthwhile. In his life, the only time he had let go of his responsibilities and cultivation path was when he asked Bailey Qingmiao if she would leave with him and wander the world. He could select someone else in the clan to take up his position, and they could accompany each other to the ends of the earth, as true cultivation partners. Sadly, Bailey Qingmiao refused him. Looking at Zhongli Qian, Xu Yanyan sighed inwardly and transmitted to Wenren, Venerable One, this subordinate is powerless against this man. Wenren didn't speak, and Xu Yanyan continued. If I wanted to get this man, I would have to give up the whole forest. Too bad I'm greedy by nature and will never dedicate myself to one person. She ordered the puppet made from Zhongli Kuang's corpse to take his soul and step before Zhongli Qian. Be quiet, close your eyes and don't move, she said gently. I'll return this trash to you. Zhongli Qian obeyed and closed his eyes. Xu Yanyan stroked his face, then gave him a quick peck on the cheek. She drew back and turned to Wenren to coldly say, Venerable One, should I cripple him too? Even Wenren and Yin Hanjiang were surprised by how swiftly Xu Yanyan could make a turn around. Refocusing, Wenren said, no need. Bring him back to Xianyuan sect. As for Zhongli Kuang, let his soul and body return to the Zhongli clan and force him to reveal all his thoughts when he gets there. Let his own clan clean up the mess. End chapter.